Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar titled Embracing a Data Culture, One Chief Data Officer's Journey Beyond Data Governance. If you have questions during the webinar, please feel free to enter them in the question panel of your viewing window. In addition, please feel free to download our attachments also in your viewer. Now for this webinar, your speakers today are myself. My name is Thomas Brentz and I'm the Director of Product Marketing for Data Quality and Data Governance here at Informatica. And the real star of our show is Barry Green, the Chief Data Officer at the Bank of Ireland. For those of you that don't know Barry, he spent 26 years in financial services. In this time, he's worked across the organization, undertaking sales, relationship, program, and operational roles at a country, regional, and global level. Throughout his career, a consistent theme has been using data and processes to understand and solve problems. His broad experience enables him to understand business strategy to serve as a conduit to drive change and collaboration through data, process, and information. Now today, Barry is going to share with us his experience on building an organizational culture around having reliable data. To start, let's understand what's happening in the world that's causing a need for organizational change to ensure trusted data. Over the years, we've had to change the way we think about and manage data. And Data 1.0 was used for specific business applications like powering payroll systems. In Data 2.0, data has been used to support enterprise-wide processes like quote-to-cash or supply chain management. We helped out in this area with products like data quality and master data management so that you could rely on your data to power your business. But what if you were going to transform your business? What if you needed to be disruptive? We're now headed into Data 3.0. This generational market shift is all about data powering digital transformations. Now, Data 3.0 is the generation where data goes from reporting on the state of the business to being predictive. It's here where you can harness the power of data to deliver insights, not on how your business is running, but rather how your business should run. It's where you can predict how to create new business models and innovate your entire operation. And we see big trends in this space over the next few years. As you know, the exponential growth of data volumes is said to be massive by the year 2020, as if it wasn't already. So if you don't have your ducks in a row soon, the problem is going to get worse. There are more people in your organization involved with data, and each will have a say. So forming a culture of collaboration has never been more important. And it's not just the volume of data that these new users will be dealing with. It's new types of data, be it from IoT, mobile, social, or data from cloud applications. Finally, and you can't read a news article today without hearing about this trend, AI and machine learning will be assisting more and more of us each year. But all of this growth is causing obstacles that we need to overcome. There are issues around the culture not being aligned, complexity and chaos where there should be clarity and cohesiveness. Your teams are struggling with limited transparency and siloed organizations. All of this change is constantly occurring and is causing shadow IT solutions to appear and for workarounds to pop up due to limited time and budgets. This pandemonium leads to organizations not working together, not collaborating, and frankly, no one having any faith in the quality and reliability and trust in the value of their data. Now that's a huge problem, right? If we're talking about this growth happening by 2020 and so much misalignment occurring, it's no wonder why your executive team doesn't trust your data. That's why so many organizations have established data governance programs, whether they're referring it to as governance or not, to ensure that data can be consistently trusted. And we've seen structures of all shapes and sizes. The best ones are collaborative. They're supportive. They are ones that include business owners and IT all in the same room. Great governance programs ensure that collaboration can occur so that problems that I illustrated earlier will be avoided. But how do you get everyone working together? How do you build this collaborative community within your metaphoric four walls? The best place to find that answer is to speak to a member of your community that's accomplished this goal. I'd like to bring in Barry Green, the Chief Data Officer, to talk about his culture at the Bank of Ireland around data. Barry's going to tell us about the processes he put in place, his executive sponsorship, and how he secured funding. He'll discuss important regulations and his viewpoints around BCBS 239 and GDPR, and he'll share his secrets from his amazing career in this space. Barry, the floor is yours. I'll see you on the other side for a bit of a fireside chat.
Thanks, Thomas. Let's get into it. So really, the first thing I'd like to say here is that it's not just about data. So while we might be using data to change the organization, there's an absolute necessary need for leadership. And it's leadership from the CDO, it's leadership from the executive sponsors, and it's leadership all throughout the business. Now, what we've looked at doing is using ownership for data and process to drive accountability. And that is really the key driver that we see as being making the changes in the group. Now, there's lots of things that we have done over the last 14 months. One of the things we've recently done is we've started to think about the way we communicate to everyone. Now, while we've had a change program in place for the last 14 months, what we realised is we weren't quite getting the message across. So what we've done is we've taken 3 simple words: correct, collaborate, and create. And so whenever we talk to our executive or we talk to any of the change programs we're working with, we talk to them about activities that are aligned to correct, collaborate, and create. And one of the key lessons I'd suggest that you'll take away from this session is make it simple. In that vein, I'd like to show you a video we created to communicate what we're doing in data management.
Our business is powered by data. Our customers create data every day worldwide. We have huge amounts of it, in lots of different formats and of varying quality. So when we try and fit it together, it doesn't seem quite right. We need to manage our data better. But this isn't easy. It will require long-term change. Good data is critical if we are to create a customer-centric bank. In response to customers' changing needs, we are transforming our digital capability and providing simpler, seamless interactions across every channel. All of this change is powered by data. Without a strong data foundation, the group will not be able to fulfill this objective, now or in the future. Data can help drive improved customer experience, cost efficiency, and regulator confidence. To get these foundations in place, let's think of our data like a supermarket. Different types of data enter the supermarket from different places and is offloaded in a staging area. There, it gets labelled and checked to make sure it passes quality control. If it doesn't, the supplier is informed and the goods are replaced. Data is packaged and grouped together in the stockroom. Because the data is well labelled and organised, staff can easily find the data they want. Even when it's on the shelf, the data is continuously checked to ensure staff can always access quality data. And if staff cannot find what they're looking for or have a problem, there is someone they can go to for help. Meaning the products customers see on the shelves are always backed up by good data. Sounds easy, right? Well, it doesn't always work that way. Things can go wrong. Imagine a supermarket with a poor supply chain. Some trucks arrive with only a few boxes, some with the wrong boxes. Some might not even arrive in trucks at all. Imagine if the products had the wrong labels, or no labels at all. Each box would need to be opened up to see what's inside, and some products would be completely inappropriate. The stockroom would be chaos. Products that hadn't been quality controlled would end up on shelves, with unsuspecting customers taking products that don't work as advertised or put them at risk. And what if customers had problems, questions, or requests? If staff don't have access to good information, they may be unable to provide answers, or even worse, may offer incorrect direction or advice. Customers might be tempted to leave our supermarket altogether and go straight to other supermarkets for their products. Because of the need for good data management, the bank has invested in a group data office so that we can build a consolidated, managed and measured data foundation, where everyone contributes to the foundation in order to use data to power our business. Everyone has responsibilities when creating, transforming and consuming data. Your data office, building the foundations for a customer-centric, forward-looking bank.
Great. I hope you guys enjoyed that. And one of the key things around the video is about simplicity, and it's about making sure that everyone understands their relationship in terms of what they do with data. Now, having been a CDO for 4 years, what I've seen is that data is a confused term. So if you think about all the systems you have in your organization and all the data, you're talking hundreds and thousands of data elements. So when you think about data, how do you kind of conceptualize all of that into one place? It's critical to get an understanding of what your data landscape is, but effectively you've got to be able to prioritize the way you attack and govern and manage data. Now, there's no silver bullet. It's absolutely hard work. You need a lot of resilience, and communication and change is a key to building a foundation. So when I talk about collaboration, generally I start with collaboration as the new black. And what do I mean by that? So a CDO is a conduit for change. So at the start I talked about it's not just about data, it's also about change. And I also talk about process in the same sentence. So I'm talking about collaboration, I'm talking about being a conduit for change, and I'm talking about process and data. Now, it doesn't matter what color the boxes are on this page. It doesn't matter what the titles are in this page. The key thing is that without any one of these, it's not going to work. You absolutely have to collaborate across the business. The business models are changing. We're seeing that, and it's time that we start thinking about the way we do business. It's no longer about holding on to power, having silos. We absolutely have to connect the organisation and make sure that we're operating in a way that we reduce cost, we increase revenue, we increase customer satisfaction, and we increase employee engagement. These things are critical, and data is at the heart of all of that. And as I said, data and process are really the key ways of contextualizing all that data we have in our systems landscape. And so what we need to do is we need to think about the prioritization of that data and the prioritization of how we attack that. So something else I've seen as we started to look at process, as we started to look at collaboration, as we started to look at how we prioritize, is actually the problem statement is the same. It's the lens that's different. And what we've done is we've looked at sort of 10 or 15 questions, and effectively we've asked people in different parts of the organization and different programs the same questions, and then we've got them all back in a room and asked them the same questions again. And what we realize is that actually everyone has the same issues, they just look at it from a different view. So if you think about BCBS 239, sort of risk aggregation reporting, data governance, that's one lens. If you look at GDPR, you're looking at privacy and you're looking at governance and understanding data and process. That's another lens. There's lots of different lenses that people in the organization are looking at, but the problem statement is common. They're sort of saying, what data do I have? How do I become compliant? Who owns data? Really critical, common questions. So it's fundamental that when you look at the problem, you don't try and create multiple solutions. You create a solution to solve all those problems at once. You've got the ability to rework, to build on solutions through understanding and learning. And you need to do that through looking at the end-to-end life cycle. Now, what we've done here again is we've used simple language. So we've said, what do we understand about data? So we understand it through contextualizing it through process, and we need to look at the end-to-end process. An end-to-end process can be whatever we want. It can be a collection of 2 or 3 processes, or it can be 1 process, or it could be 20 processes. It all depends, again, it's what lens are you looking through. The next thing is about alignment. So in building a foundation for management, you need to consider the alignment of data. So what's critical for both process and data, and who owns it. And ownership, as I've already mentioned, is a key component. An example I like to ask, or a question I like to ask people is, when I'm at conferences, I sort of say, right, so can anyone in the audience who's got a mortgage put your hand up? And then I want you to put your other hand up if you own your own home. And generally, most people have two hands up. I kind of say to them, hey guys, look, bad news here is you might have a home, but you don't own it. You've got an equity stake. And the reason I make this point is because ownership needs to be really clearly defined. Most organisations talk about ownership like they have it, and it's well defined and everyone understands it. Just like the example I gave, most of the time people think about it differently, and we need to clarify what that means. We also need to understand the different parties in the process and make sure that we can connect them and collaborate, and we understand the interdependencies between the process. So then we need to think about how we've defined what the end-to-end process looks like. We've applied critical data. We've understood key process steps. We've aligned ownership, but we need to make sure that we monitor. And we monitor the quality of the data. And so we've got a data quality framework that we've put in place, and we're using this Informatica tools to basically give us a good view on what our data is. And when we look at quality, we're looking at quality in different levels. So we've kind of defined level 1 as being very, very rudimentary. So is the name field populated? The second is, the second one might be, is the name field populated and does it make sense? And the third one is the name field populated? We've scanned a passport and we've basically validated the name in the system against the passport and it's correct. So there's different levels of quality, but the key point here is that we're monitoring what's going on. The next thing is we need to define what the root cause is if something's going wrong with the data or the process. And the point is that you need to fix what's really wrong, not what you think is wrong. And that's fundamentally important. So that leads on to fixing the problem, and you need to prioritize the fixes that you have because you haven't got endless amounts of money. So again, it's all about commercial value. It's all about understanding what really needs to be changed and making sure that what has to be fixed is fixed first. So think about the words I've used: understand, align, monitor, define, and fix. Then my 8-year-old can use all of those words. You can put them in a sentence. The message we have to give here has got to be simple. Everyone's got to understand it. So when we put all our components together, we basically put them together so that not just so that we could map a process once, or we could understand what the critical data was for BCBS at a point in time. We had to make this thing living and breathing. And what we've done is we've tied it to the first, second, and third line of defense model. So the way it works from kind of left to right is we map process, we understand the key process components, and we understand the critical data within that process. And then we put that into action. Then we basically map data to our business data model so that we're building out a data model as we prioritize all the critical projects. And that way we're starting to understand where the physical data in our systems maps, and we've got a much better idea in the future of how we can interact and use this for change control. We then assign ownership, and we've got a defined ownership model, and then that also goes into Axon. So not only can you see the process, not only can you see the critical data, and not only is that data defined in the business data model, but we now have ownership, and we can't change anything going forward unless it's owned and unless that person signs off on it. Now, when someone owns something, they obviously want to see what the quality looks like, so we apply our data quality framework. And then on an ongoing basis, we use controls. So for example, if you own a process or a piece of critical data, you're required at least annually to go and validate that the process hasn't changed, that the definition of the data hasn't changed, and that the outcome that it's serving is still fit for purpose. And that's not just important from a regulatory point of view, it's important from a customer point of view as well. And then we use the ongoing controls to make sure that people are doing what they said they're doing when they're reviewing it on a second line basis. And then we have our audit department go and review that on a third line basis. So we've basically tied in all our change activity, so mapping process, defining critical data, mapping to the BDM, assigning ownership, and implementing data quality. And then we keep that living and breathing through at least an annual process of reviewing and using controls. So it's also important when you put together a data strategy that you think about it from both a tactical and a strategic point of view. And the reason I talk about tactical and strategic is you have to do something first. So you have to think about putting in place what I call data management and the data quality and the architecture, so understanding those things. Now, we all want to get into doing the really, sexy stuff with the algorithms and the unstructured data, but you've got to have your base infrastructure right. However, what you do need to know is where you're going. And so what we've done is we've got several things which we call reference points for decision making. So our policy is one of those. Our data standards is another one. Our data architecture is another one. And then we have what we call an information strategy. And that's all about defining the different information types in the group, how we're going to govern them, and then how we're also going to serve them through the tooling so that we drive consistency and standardization. And that's important because otherwise what happens, and what I've seen happen in a lot of organizations, is everyone goes off without any clear direction and does things. And when you have to bring them together again, it costs more money, it costs more time, and people don't like unwinding things they've already put in place. So it's really important that we think about not just what we're doing now, but what it's going to look like in the future, and we allow the business to understand what direction they're heading in. And it's really important also that we don't strive for perfection, and that we basically make sure that whatever the journey is, we're going in the right direction, but we're not basically trying to get to 100%, otherwise you'll cripple yourself in terms of execution. So what happens if you've kind of started your journey and you've implemented a whole lot of infrastructure, and then all of a sudden the strategy changes? Well, the really great thing about looking at this from the point of view that the problem statement is common is that it doesn't really matter what the lens is, the questions remain the same. Now, you may need to change direction a little bit, but actually because you've got a common set of questions and you're looking at everything as having a consistent problem, whatever framework you've put in place, you can change relatively easy. And so the key thing here is to make sure that you view everything and you create frameworks that fix the same problem, even though everyone thinks it's a different problem because they're looking at it from a specific lens. Now, another problem we had when we were looking at the policy was we've got all these systems. So you go back to the first slide where we had all the data is everywhere and all the systems and things. So how do you work out what you attack first? Well, the first thing we did was we looked at it and we said, wait a second, we've got BCBS 239, we've got GDPR, we've got our core banking systems implementation. Now those are big change programs. So why not change through change? Because that seems to make sense. And the idea here was that if we try and fix all our legacy issues, we'd basically be fixing the legacy issues. It'd be less focus on what we were doing going forward, and we were likely to create more legacy. So the whole idea around Fix Forward is it provides a prioritization methodology to focus on the activity that's going on at the moment, or the change, and put frameworks and all the governance into those programs first to make sure that whatever resources you've got are going into making sure that whatever activity you're doing going forward is being done in the right way. That doesn't mean that we can't fix legacy issues. So anti-money laundering, data remediation is something we need to do, but you can use governance to prioritize that, and that's fine. And then, if there's additional scope that comes into play, you can add it through your governance as well. The key thing here is that you've got to prioritize. If you don't focus on doing the things that you're doing today for the future right, you're going to create more legacy. So you must get those things right. And then it just becomes a circular loop. So another interesting concept that we had to think about was around measurement. Now, I've seen some very, very complicated ways of measuring data management, and you can cripple yourself. So what we decided was we weren't going to have large teams doing this. We absolutely had to spend all our resource executing on activity and change programs. So we came up with a number of dimensions, and we looked at it and said we're going to basically create a simple 1 to 5 matrix, and we were going to define what each of those things meant in plain English, and then we were going to use that as a form of measurement. So when we put the strategy together, the blue shape in the middle was effectively how we were assessed in terms of where we were today. The orange line was where we wanted to be in 12 to 18 months. And then the grey line on the outside was where we wanted to be in 5 years. So we've absolutely got a tactical focus, fixed forward prioritisation. We've got our frameworks in place that we know how we're going to attack all the activity we need to do. But we've always got a view on where we want to be and make sure that where we're going is the right place for the organisation. So the key thing here is I'm going to start at the beginning and just talk about what we did. So effectively, if you think about it from a puzzle, what we did was say, looked at the organisation and we understood what we needed. And then we basically said, we've got a whole lot of things here. And some of them are half complete, some of them are complete, but the pieces don't fit. The whole point of putting together the strategy was to make sure that we had a cohesive, nice puzzle that was put together that everyone could understand. It was all about building once and developing standards. It was all about driving value through the P&L, and it was all about meeting regulatory demand. Now, because we've built consistent frameworks that fix problems viewed from different lenses, it means that we've got consistency and we've got a standard way of operating in the organisation. Therefore, the change, while it is massive, is less problematic because it's consistently being applied to all the key change programs. So we've only just started our journey, but we've achieved an awful lot over the last 14 months. We've got an awful lot to do going forward over the next 5 years, but we know where we're going. We're starting to build out our frameworks in terms of executing them on an operational basis. Hopefully that's helped you think about what you're doing in your business today. And there's some ideas in there that you might like to take away.
I know it's certainly helped me, Barry, and really appreciate you taking the time to walk us through that. Thank you very, very much for that. I've been kind of watching the questions come in here. We have quite a bit, so hopefully you're ready to answer a few questions for us. And while everyone else starts to think about their questions and kind of type them into that pane, the question window, please feel free to continue to do so. There's also an attachments window where you can download a few other things, and you'll see a link in there for some follow-up deep dive webinars. You may want to take a look at that, and it might be another area of interest for you. Now, Barry, while you were talking, there was a decent amount of questions flowing in, so I've tried to kind of organize them here. So hopefully I have them in some set of a structure here, and we'll continue to take more and more as they come in. But there was a question about, and it's kind of interesting that it comes up because it's sort of where you end the presentation as well, as what the situation was like when you first came in. Were there processes already in place? Was there a team? What was the strategy and vision? Like, what was there whenever you started?
I think that's a pretty easy question. Nothing. So the banks is probably one of the oldest organisations I've ever come across. It's 230 plus years old. So there was no data strategy, there was no data policy, and while people were thinking about data, it wasn't being considered properly. It was very, so effectively we started from scratch. Luckily, because I'd been at HSBC previously and sort of put together or helped to put together the CDO structure, I had some working examples I could work from. But we've developed some things over the last 14 months just because there's no one solution that meets all requirements. You've got to work with the organisation. So started from nothing and kind of explained where we're at today.
Yeah, I think you did a really good job explaining where you were at today too. And you sort of touched on the executive sponsor. You mentioned it during your presentation. What was the executive sponsor for you there? Often we see these programs fail because they don't have great buy-in. Can you tell us a little bit about that sponsor that you have?
Yeah, there was a lesson that I took away from HSBC. It's fundamental to have executive sponsorship. It's kind of a no-brainer. But I guess what I've learned at Bank of Ireland is that everyone talks about having an executive sponsor. What I would say is you need multiple executive sponsors. So there's always arguments around where does the CDO sit I don't think it really matters as long as you've got one or more than one executive sponsor. So I've got the COO and the CFO, and I'm actively looking to build more executive sponsors. Now, you're never going to have the entire board or the entire exco as a sponsor, but you need to have it more than one, in my view, and you need to have probably maximum 4. So you got to look at the people on the executive committee, on your board, and understand who in there really is interested and understands. Because the biggest issue you've got, we've talked about with communication, is that you're going to have lots of people with different levels of understanding. So you want to kind of pick the 4 or the 1 or 2 who really understand it, and work with them, and then let them or get them to help you bring everyone else on board.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, really like practical piece of advice, right? Not to have just one executive sponsor, but look for others, throughout the organization, people that can back the work that you're doing. And it sort of leads to, there's kind of a series of questions around the team, right? Because, even when you have the sponsors on board, you're asking the team to handle governance. That can be a heavy lift. Now, how do you get the team members on board? How do you start that structure?
It's all about talking to the businesses in their own language. Really key is it's about understanding their problem and putting. So I talked about viewing it's the same problem from a different lens. So you need to give them an answer, knowing what their lens on the problem is. And the other thing is that, with all the regulation coming down the track, it's easy to talk about the fact that it's for regulatory requirements. But what you need, the way I've tackled it is said, look, what have we done in the past? We can't keep doing the same thing. We have to do things differently. And this is the way we're going to do it differently. And we have to do it differently because the regulator's telling us that what we've done in the past isn't good enough. And then relating it back to their business problem and saying, and here's the benefit we're going to get from that.
Excellent. I noticed when you're kind of answering the questions, and also in your conversation, you don't always call it data governance. You sort of refer to it as management, right? Let's talk about that for a second. What's your philosophy on it? Because I think it's great.
So I'm gonna annoy a few risk people here, but I don't like the term governance because it's got a negative connotation. So when people think of governance generally, or when I do, people think of people coming in, adding a whole lot of work to what we do today without taking anything away because we have to, because it's governance. So the reason I use management is because management's about understanding and actioning things and adding value. So when I talk about data management, it's exactly what I talk about. I talk about we're not here yes, we are going to apply some governance, but it's about management. It's about understanding the problem. It's about taking away activity and adding activity that adds more value. And it's about making sure that we meet regulatory demand, we're saving on the P&L, we're driving P&L value, and we're improving customer experience and employee engagement. So that's kind of my view. And I know it's kind of semantics in a way, but I think that if you don't get the message right, and people basically start to turn off before you've even started.
Oh yeah, I think it totally comes back to your culture, right? And you're doing everything there to get your team on board. So if management is what makes it feel like something they can accomplish, that's the thing that you want to build around. And there's a couple questions here around this, and I'm going to kind of like punctuate it here. How do you know that you started to make an impact? Was there a magical moment to point to and say, that's it, now they get it?
Yeah, it's interesting. So the way I describe being a CDO is it's a bit like being bipolar, right? You have your really good days and your really bad days. And early on, like I think I alluded to this in the presentation, we were thinking about, we've only got limited resources, we've got massive change projects going on, so we're going to change through change. So how do we create something that allows us to prioritize the activity? And we use the term fix forward. Now, I'd got the policy approved. Fix forward was a term that we'd use, and it had only really been in existence for kind of 6 weeks. And I was in a meeting 2 weeks later, and no one knew who I was, and I turned up late, so I sort of just walked in and sat down. And then someone started talking about fix forward, and I had this massive smile on my face and thought, I don't know who that person is, and they're talking about fix forward. So clearly, people are talking about what we're doing. People are talking about the concepts. And I knew at that moment that we were starting to make progress. So it was really just about that communication. You know, it wasn't, I hadn't formally communicated to them, but other people had been gone out selling the message, and here were people in the meeting saying, we've got to use Fix Forward. So that for me was the key moment.
Wow, that's great. Fix Forward. I mean, to hear your term become part of the lexicon, I mean, it certainly points to the fact that you've kind of crossed that chasm. But now you got to get them to work, right? And there's a couple questions here about some of those early initiatives. What were, some of those early on projects that you got them to work on as part of your program? Can you talk a little bit about those early initiatives?
Yeah, so when I first started, it was really, it was because of BCBS 239. But I was fairly, clear. I said, look, BCBS 239 is a recipient of data management. It's not a reason for doing data management. So it all comes back to the kind of different lens, same problem. So, a big part of what I did to start off with was education and going out, selling the message around why we needed data management, understanding what was going on in the organisation. And as we sort of came up with a change through change idea, the idea was, it was all about basically making sure that people were going to do things in the right way. And therefore, it wasn't about creating a massive data organisation. In fact, I absolutely started off saying, I don't want to have a big data organisation, and I never want a big data organisation because the work has to be done in the first line or in the business. And I think that was a good sell because one of the things I've seen happen in other places, and I think it's a mistake, is people come in and start creating big shadow organisations to manage data. It's got to be managed right throughout the business. Everyone's got a responsibility for data. And so it was all about hitting all the big programs, understanding what the issues were, and then starting to think about how we could create frameworks that would fix those problems.
I got it. So that's sort of how you got the funding, right? Because we have a lot of questions about how do you get the funding. I think people are really kind of struggling with that. But if that's sort of where the funding started, it seems like your program kind of grew into a full enterprise program. Any tips that you have out there for people that may be struggling with the funding side of the equation, and then how do you grow that beyond where the initial funding came from? I know a lot of people are looking at GDPR as maybe a way in to kind of get their dream projects worked on. Any tips there?
Yeah, so I think again it's same message. Start small and show value through driving out consistency in something, and then showing how it can be reused. And then you can talk about other frameworks you've got and how they can be reused in other programs. And effectively, the programs have to undertake this work anyway. So if you think about GDPR, they have to map process to understand how the data flows in the organisation, and how we can. So that's one example. BCBS is another. A lot of these programs need to do the same activity. We just need to make sure that we give them standards to do it at the right level, in the right way. So they're still spending the same project money, but they're effectively helping to build out the understanding of data and process in the group. So the reason we basically got Axon on board was because we wanted a tool that would help us collaborate. And effectively what we did was we went to the programs and said, well, there's no point in you guys mapping some stuff for GDPR or understanding where all the data sits. You need somewhere to record it. And then we need, through the frameworks we've developed, once we apply ownership, it'll be an ongoing basis of keeping it up to date. And that's what we need. Do you agree? Yes. Fine. Here's how you go. And so effectively what we've done is we've got a very small centralized team. And then we've basically just gone to the projects and started to help them do things in a consistent way. And then we've put tooling in place like the data quality tooling, Axon, to effectively mean we've got a way of capturing this and reusing it for the future. Because one of the big things that people were telling us is, we did this work 4 years ago sitting in someone's shared drive and we don't know where it is. So the visibility, the collaboration through Axon was a key thing. But it's all about giving them a way to solve their problems in a consistent way so that you can reuse that information, and then applying ownership so it becomes living and breathing. And then it's not just a change activity, it's an ongoing activity for the way you operate.
I appreciate that. And I love that you kind of build it around collaboration. That's always key, I think, to building around the culture and getting business and IT working together. I noticed that you didn't mention data stewards. What's kind of your viewpoint there as well?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one actually, because I'm a bit controversial in the fact that I don't like the term data stewards, and the reason I don't like the term data stewards is that what we've basically said is that data is everyone's responsibility. And when I think about a data steward, it sort of seems to suggest you're going to have some pointy-head person sitting in the corner just looking at the data, and then everyone else doesn't need to do anything, and that's absolutely not the way we need to think. So what we did was we said we're going to have 5 roles. We're going to have owners, we're going to have consumers, owners, producers, governance, and we're going to have custodians. And custodians is all the technology. But effectively, all those other roles, you could have at least one, but generally you're going to have 2 of. So my question back to everyone was, what is a data steward? Is it a producer? Is it a consumer? Is it someone who has governance? The answer is yes, but don't call them data stewards, because we need to basically make sure that everyone understands there are 5 core roles, 4 of them they may have, and what their part is in playing, and making sure that they understand the data and looking after the data that they used to do their job with. So I really don't like that term, and I've had some heated debates with some consultants about that.
I can only imagine. And I appreciate you being a champ here, letting me kind of pepper you with all the questions that are floating in. And, to all the listeners, I'm sorry, I don't think we'll be able to get to every question. There's a ton of them in here. We're sort of winding down on our time, but I really want to kind of end on what I thought was one of the most insightful questions to come through. It's the what's next question. What's next coming from the Bank of Ireland? What's your next project? What are you working on coming up?
Well, we've got 4 of the biggest change programs sort of in the books now. So, everyone knows who the CDO is. Everyone knows that we've got frameworks. It's about ownership. It's about assigning ownership. So we're just about to start our test case for assigning ownership across 2 of the GDPR and BCBS. And that's really where the tipping point is going to be, where once we've actually assigned something for real, people are going to start realizing that, we are going to have to start changing the way we think and the way we act and the way we manage data. And the really nice thing is that no one's sort of saying we can't do this and what you're suggesting doesn't make any sense. What they're saying is it's going to be hard work. I say absolutely it's going to be hard work. If this was easy, everyone would have already done it. That's the reason why we haven't. So let's just get on and get started. And if it doesn't work the way we think it works, we'll change it, we'll iterate it. But let's get on and get it done. So it's all about assigning that ownership.
God, so true. And I appreciate you not shying away from that hard work. It certainly seems to be beneficial there for the Bank of Ireland. Barry, I just wanted to thank you from all of us here listening in today for taking the moment and sharing your story with us. I find it very insightful. I really appreciate you telling us about how you've built that culture of change. And for those of you out there worried about some of the upcoming regulations and maybe some areas where you might be able to secure funding for your own area, we've put together this great resource around GDPR. It's GDPR Compliance for Dummies. You'll see it over in the attachments section. I hope you'll take a second, download a copy, and take a read through. And hopefully it'll help you understand the regulation just a little bit better. Barry, to all of you, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time today. And until we see you next time, thanks.